In this Wednesday's weekly question, we will talk about what Reddit user iFilm asked, which is, what does Jesus say about sin? Welcome to The Current Christian, where we give disciples the tools and tips they need to grow their ministry. Every Wednesday, we release a video where we explore questions that you ask on the internet. You won't want to miss our next episode, so be sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you are interested in sending us your own questions, you can do so by tweeting us at The Current Christ. I've got it written out there, and you can put hashtag WWQ. So this week we have a very awesome question from I_film. Hello, I_film. So what they say is, first of all, let me say that I am an atheist humanist, and my question here arises only out of curiosity and desire to further educate myself. I was wondering whether there is any mention of the nature of sins, what constitutes a sin. I know that there are mentions of sins in the Bible in general, but I was wondering whether Jesus himself said anything about what is a sin. Thank you. Well, first of all, you are really dope for actively trying to educate yourself. Both Christians and non-Christians should be doing what you're doing right now. So you're honestly really awesome for doing that. So there are multiple questions in your post, and I'm thinking we can just address each one in order. Also, if you would like to see my notes and Bible references for this episode, I put them in the video description, so feel free to check them out. Is there any mention of the nature of sin in the Bible? Yes, there is. The Bible is full of poetic imagery and often many similes, metaphors, and analogies in order to better express an idea or a message. Sin is often related to a heavy burden, something that we carry, which causes us constant stress and weighs us down. Sin is also described as a stain. It creates, dirty marks. It's hard to fully clean and remove. Sin is also referred to as creating debt, kind of like money, but instead of owing money, it's the idea that sin takes away from life, therefore life is owed, which is why the Israelites used to do the whole animal sacrificing thing, but we're not really going to get into that part right now. Lastly, there's my favorite description of sin, which is when it's related to a lion. It's something dangerous, something that's like deadly, tactful, and very strong. There are also many more descriptions of sin's nature, and I linked an article in the description that talks about all of those pretty much. So, what constitutes a sin? Well, I think the best way to describe it is to use the original Hebrew word for sin, which is Chata, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that properly. This word literally means to miss the mark. So if you were to try to shoot an arrow and get a bullseye and miss, that would technically be Chata. But often the sin we see in the Bible is always related to people going against what God said. We see this in chapter 3 of Genesis, when Eve and Adam eat the fruit that God told them specifically not to eat. If you read it, I want you to notice that the sin wasn't Adam or Eve being tempted. The sin wasn't them doubting or questioning God. It wasn't sin that they hid from God or clothed themselves. No, the sin was them not listening to God when he said to not eat the fruit. Sure, them doubting God and avoiding God may have played part in them eating the fruit, but these things in and of themselves are not sin. Rather, it's the act of disobeying God which is sin. Technically, we sin all the time. The first 5 commandments are all summed up by loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and the last 5 commandments are summed up as love your neighbor as yourself. And this is all from Luke chapter 10, verse 27. And these 2 things can even be summed up by do everything out of love, which is 1 Corinthians chapter 16, 14. And I know for a fact that there are times where we are all not loving. Therefore, that is a sin. So sin is practically inescapable because by nature, we will at some point miss the mark. That's why when people talk about Jesus, it's always referred to as the good news or the gospel. The bad news is that we are not perfect and therefore cannot be in a perfect world or in the presence of a perfect God. The good news is that Jesus has removed the burden, cleaned the stain, paid the debt, and killed the lion to allow us to be with God. However, we aren't trying to talk about the gospel stuff in this episode. We're trying to explore what Jesus says about sin. So the thing that is very interesting is that throughout Jesus' ministry on earth, he actively went to help the non-religious and sinful people. One would think he would try to cram laws and rules down the people's throats, like how you see most religious people do. But in fact, the thing Jesus hated the most was the behavior of the religious leaders and people at the day. Hypocrisy was a big one that got Jesus very ticked off. Being spiritually prideful is another one that Jesus despised. Indifference to human need. In Mark chapter 3, verse 1-5, the religious leaders would rather follow rules they set for themselves than let Jesus heal a man. So Jesus was upset about that and ended up healing the person anyway, which is awesome. But Jesus didn't just address the big issues. He even made sure to mention that even the tiny acts that lead up to sin should be taken as seriously as, the big sin. As he says it like this, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out, throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body." The way this verse was explained to me was done by comparing it to an infected body part. If a body part is infected and not treated, it could destroy the whole body. If it can't be treated, then it's best to just remove that part of the body in order to save the whole. All right, so we talked about sin's nature being described as a burden, stain, debt, and lion. We also mentioned how sin is defined as missing the mark, then talked about hypocrisy, spiritual pride, and indifference. We even wrapped up by talking a little bit about how the acts that lead to sin are things that Jesus wants us to take seriously. I_film, thank you again for the awesome question. I hope this video helped to answer all of them. I wrote notes in the video description so you can take the time that you need to peruse through those. And since I answered a question, I'd like for you all to answer a question too. When was a time you decided to forgive someone before they apologize for doing wrong? Write your answer in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. Thanks for watching. I'd also like to thank our community of supporters over on Patreon. This video wouldn't be made possible without you. And if you really like this video, you too can join our crew of Patreon supporters by donating a few dollars a month to the Current Christian channel. Remember to hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon if you haven't done so already. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in our next video.